All right, what's up, buddy? Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you just fine. How are you doing?
Hey, doing good. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm annoyed because there's a lot of dumb people in my chat now, which show up whenever I talk about COVID and vaccines and stuff. But otherwise, I'm doing fine.
Well, that's what you get when you're the fucking world's best debunker. So,
I
it kind of comes
guess.
with the territory, right?
Yeah, I suppose. But holy fuck, I don't know if I knew the consequences going into this. Oh boy, the amount of shit I would have
My,
to be exposed to. But yeah.
oh man, my favorite comment under the Lauren debate is, "Oh no, RoseWrist is about to debunk."
Yeah, I said it so many times. Like this entire debate is just turned into a fucking debunking debate. But sure, if you want to go down there, hey, I have a bit of experience going down debunking shit, so we can run it if you want. I'm not sure if it's gonna end out well for you, but I guess that's the direction the discussion went. So yeah.
Yeah, so I kind of want to talk about that because of the fallout from the Taylor Twin Rabbits debate or whatever. Like I'm getting a decent bit of right wing exposure to bigger sites or whatever. And so there's this guy, Actual Justice Warrior, who did a response trying to validate. I think I actually saw that you did a response recently,
Hmm.
trying to validate the stats that Lauren was talking about. But then I feel like they're missing the systemic argument. Did you feel that there was anything of value in his response to you?
So I mean, he provided I mean, the best thing there was he provided a study that wasn't unpublished, which is a higher bar than Lauren, I guess. I mean, there's that,
Mm.
but I mean, most of this was like I specifically went over the nature study bit and the BLM 7% bit because that's what I sort of brought up. I left the rest for Fanatic to go over when it comes to the Ferguson and bit like that. And when it comes to going through that, I think his arguments for that were not great. But I 100% agree with you that I think the most like boring or the most disappointing part of this is how like especially during the debate you can see this super clearly how they just want to completely gloss over and hop over the much more substantial and significant and impactful aspect to this whole discussion about BLM and systemic racism and stuff like that, which is the actual systemic racism part. And instead, they want to go and roll around the mud with specific like instances of police bias and study this, study that, when the most impactful and the really key topic of this discussion, what we should be spending our most time on talking about, would be the issue of systemic racism as a whole. And Lauren just like completely jumped over and didn't want to talk about that during the debate. And Actual Justice Warrior didn't even like bring that up or talk about that as a whole. In fact, I think he even made fun of me at some points in the video for not wanting to take like a broad discussion, whatever that means, which was I suppose like a bit silly given the context of the discussion. But yeah.
Well, yeah, and I guess that's my communicative frustration is like ultimately I think that like words are supposed to communicate meaning, right? So we can talk about like definitions and all that kind of stuff, but ultimately like semantic conversations are the most boring for me because like
Mhm.
I don't really care what word you use. You want to call it systemic racism or historic injustice. I
Yep.
don't give a shit if we're describing the same thing. And kind of what part of the reason why I was quiet was for the first 90 minutes is because again, I don't care what we call it. I just care that we land on some level of descriptive reality and prescriptive solution. And so I think that I'm going to try to talk to Actual Justice Warrior in the future,
Mhm.
because I think what they're trying to do is they're trying to isolate it down to policing. And they're
Mhm.
trying to say that like, oh, well, we've updated our laws specifically to be non-racist, and basically the systemic outcomes within the justice system in particular are things that we've moved past racist intent and racist prescription.
Mhm.
So when you see disparate results, these are just the results of like criminal behavior or whatever. But
Bad
even if
choices or stuff like that is what you typically hear. Yeah.
yeah, but even if that were true, then that doesn't address like using lefty arguments, right? That
Mhm.
doesn't address like historic inequality or intergenerational wealth or systemic racism from those things when you talk about like redlining or lead paint or any of that kind of shit.
Mhm.
And that's where it's like just to move the conversation forward. It's like, okay, so you're saying that like policing isn't systemically racist and we need to address our shit elsewhere. I think
Mhm.
there's actually like a whole bunch of prescriptions that social conservatives in particular and left-wingers would actually align on. And that's kind of where I get frustrated with this like binary, like, no, you're stupid, no, you're stupid kind of conversation.
Yeah, and I agree with you 100%. And I've made the exact thing you said now in the starting of the last thing you said, which is like, okay, I don't really care what you specifically call it, is an argument, or like, no, it's not even an argument. It's something that I've said so many times that like, hey, as long as we can agree on what this actually is, like conceptually, call it whatever the fuck you want, as long as we all agree that this is a problem and this is something that needs to be addressed. And to some extent, I feel like there is like an element of like ideological bias, obviously, that leans into why, for example, a lot of conservative right-wing people may want to like dodge this conversation as a whole, or maybe like not even buy into the label entirely, because it's been such a thing that's been so closely attached to like BLM and these whole discussions that, hey, even though I would posture that a big part of the reason why they would rather like roll around the mud with specific like instances of policing and racial bias and study this, study that, is because that they know that having an argument about whether or not the broader instance of systemic racism is real is a lot of harder conversation to have, especially if you're like coming from a denialist perspective, and because of that, that discussion never actually ends up happening, which is super frustrating. Because yeah, I'd love to have that discussion, because I think that's the most meaningful. It's the most meaningful part of this discussion as a whole.
Well, and this is where I'm going to call out the right a little bit. I think they're so busy taking like interpersonal offense at the implication that either they're racist or contributing to racism, or that their ancestors were racist or contributing to racism. I think they're so busy. Sorry for the dog noises. But they're so busy taking offense that they don't even understand how their values would ultimately imply that even if they didn't agree on the description, we could actually come to some kind of agreement on description. So, for instance, a majority of the right wing these days say that they're not racist. They say that racism is bad, that basically we shouldn't be judging people based off of immutable characteristics. We should be judging them based off of the content of their character. And on top of that, like, families are incredibly important. Well, if you look at the Black community, like, marriage and two-parent households is not the only problem, especially if there's like stressing factors like economics and education and access to opportunity and all that kind of stuff. So if you were a civic nationalist, like anti-racist, bootstrapping kind of person, then you should still agree that the prescription is to give everybody access to high quality education and access to high quality employment, and also to give them enough money and enough opportunity in order to build healthy, strong American families. And that's where I kind of think like we can't even jump to that prescription because we're so aggressively offended by the implication that either us or our ancestors were racist.
Yeah, I know. And that I think to some extent, if you're calling out the right on this, I'll call out elements of the left as well. Obviously, like with most things, generally societally is, especially like online spaces, are fairly like left-leaning, and whenever there is a large concept that enters like mainstream discussions, no matter really what it is, you're going to get some terrible representation of that idea and what it entails from both sides. So you will see like a bunch of left-leaning people like specifically make arguments that like white people like today are like personally condemnable and at fault for this. It's a very small minority of people, but even if it's a small minority of people will latch onto this and use these as sort of like their arguments, and they will use that to sort of like fuel their contempt or their understanding, I suppose, for the opposition's argument. So and just generally with like the term systemic racism as well, and like people believing that like it's all like really stems down to this is a broader one than people saying like white people today are specifically condemnable, which is that like, oh, systemic racism is alive and real today because like everybody that works within a system is like racist, which is a terrible understanding of the topic as well, and just generally non-productive discourse.
And this is something that I realized when I'm still a part of a right-wing group on Facebook, which is really interesting, kind of like my evolution of seeing internet propaganda and how it works. And it really took me like a really long time to kind of understand the pipeline. So one of the things that was very common that I would do is I was in a bunch of like private right-wing groups, and I would see like a fucking shitty Twitter hot take, and it would be screenshotted with or without metrics. And then it would be posted in Facebook, like, look how insane the fucking left is. Yeah. And then what happened when I came to Twitter, I was actually fucking shocked because I'm a boomer, so I wasn't on Twitter for a really long time. So I was actually shocked because I get onto Twitter, and it turns out that the people who were given like the shittiest hot takes that I had previously seen in, posted to Facebook groups, they were controversial figures even amongst leftists on Twitter. So instead of being like, oh yeah, Mayo side now, fuck Whitey, you know, everybody who participates in a racist system is a piece of shit and should get genocided or whatever. Like literally these are like the screenshots that are being spread in right-wing groups. Instead what I saw was somebody with a hot take like that. And then I saw like a whole bunch of people fighting them in the comments. And there was not like some universal leftist understanding of like, you know, dog shit, worst Twitter hot take bullshit. And I was like, oh, turns out these people aren't a bunch of fucking like monomaniacal, anti-white, racist fucking monsters. Turns out that there's actually like a whole bunch of people who are really fighting over the descriptions and the prescriptions. And there's a steel man and a straw man. And unfortunately, there's a whole bunch of fucking idiots who believe the straw man. And seeing that, it helped me recognize that in the right as well. Where there's a bunch of dumb fucks on the right who say really fucking cringe shit, and basically you have to yell at them at the expense of being ostracized from your own community.
Yeah, I mean, this is like a problem just generally of like political polarization, I guess, and especially the internet where you can find like literally any opinion you want ever by if you just like look hard enough, and then you can like, you know, blow that up however large you need it to be in order to make your point or whatever. So it gets it gets like troubling in that department. But yeah, overall I definitely it's a shame that, you know, like the topics of discussion are like super like unproductive in nature, and that like even like a good debate on this like specific topic, like from even like the side I agree with, like, okay, you made this debate but you still haven't touched on like the key important thing here, which in this specific instance is systemic racism. And it's a shame that more people aren't having like the debates and discussions on that specifically, and that is something I would have loved to have talked about with like Lauren Southern during that debate, for instance, or with actual Justice Warrior. But I have been called the worst slur of them all, a debate bro, by both of them. So I don't think I'm going to be obtaining any of those conversations anytime soon.
Nah, but like you roll with pigs, you got to expect to get shit on you, and like that's like that's my thing. That's my participation with like the Twitch panel sphere or whatever. Is like, hey, I'm super happy to have like these complex discussions on interesting topics and all that kind of stuff. And if I feel like the participant or the appetite is there, then I'm super happy to go like really deep, really prescriptive, really descriptive, and try to find some consensus and some world building and all that kind of stuff. And I know that's more boring for the audience or whatever, but at the same time, like part of the reason why we're in such a fucking mess right now is because we mistook politics for entertainment. And there's an aspect of politics that is entertainment, but it shouldn't be a substitution. And that's kind of where the binary in particular is like really frustrating for me. Because so for instance, like the temptation that I see when you're obviously like Lauren Southern's a contentious figure, right? To say the least.
Yeah.
Kind of minimizing there a little bit. But the contention is, oh, this person is a part of a political faction, so I'm going to make them look like an asshole. That way the people on their side doubt their loyalty to this cult of personality, and then the people on my side affirm that they're the smarter people in the room. I think there's a use for that, but I also think there needs to be like a variability in content where we kind of get past the cults of personality and the debunking and the blood sports, and we also start talking about like policy and points of consensus. And that's really like my frustration is like it's really hard to fucking get there when everybody's trying to dunk on everybody.
Yeah, like fundamental, like this is true of just like so many things in life. Fundamentally, when you have like a group of people that listen to you, just like a relationship or a parasocial relationship with like a person or public figure or whatever, fundamentally what the public figure or like the person in authority in any situation there should do, and this is a non-profitable thing to do, which is why not a lot of people do it, but they wanted to, as much as possible, be able to like externalize the value of their interactions with you to the point where they're able to do that types of things themselves, and they can latch onto something that isn't necessarily just you. So obviously this is like directly in opposition to like cults of personality, right? Where you're like, hey, come here, I promise you I'm going to make you as a follower of me look super smart. I'll do all the thinking for you. You just have to show up to my streams and like proclaim your support for me or whatever.
And give me $1.99 in super chat.
Exactly. You fucking freeloader. Yeah, exactly. And that type of thing. When in like reality, the best possible thing to do is like try to externalize it, be like, okay, so Let's try to ensure that people that are like watching you or whatever are given the tools to be able to do that type of like thinking and looking at policies for themselves, attaching your political ideology or like your political advocacy behind specific policies or movements or whatever. So it's not just like, oh, I politically am like Vosh or Destiny or RoseWrist or whatever, instead of like, hey, so I believe in these policies, and these are the ways I push for them or whatever, and sort of like make it more like, yeah, you can do these types of things like on your own from this point forward. So it's not just like you are expecting to be like handhold everywhere, and and
Yeah,
that would
and
always be like a
that's
super beneficial thing.
well, and I think that's the frustration with basically like content creation, at least from my perspective, is
Mhm.
like there's always this temptation. Like I'm not going to indulge in it because I think it's how we ended up in such a toxic place in the first place. But there's always this temptation to be like, all right, fuck it. Nobody really wants to like think for themselves anyways, so I'm just gonna join like a cohesive or coherent faction that already has all their prescriptions fucking sussed out, and then I'm just gonna go after that audience, and I'm just gonna tell them what they want to hear, because it seems like the most successful people, obviously there's exceptions, like some content creators go to war with their audiences all the time and are still
Mhm.
successful. But at the same time, it does seem like there's a lot of people, a lot of like alternative media pundits who are extremely successful, because they basically like identify a demographic and they're like, oh, what do you want to hear? Okay, I'll just
Mhm.
say that. And
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
literally, but then they become trapped by their own audiences, because they get used to saying things that they don't necessarily believe
Mhm.
uncritically, and they make a shitload of money, but then when they try to deviate from their fucking audience, they're punished.
Mhm.
And I think that's kind of like the trap that, so for instance, like Nick Fuentes in particular, I think Lauren Chen is another good example. There are these political pundits who basically are like, oh well, I'm just going to tell them what they want to hear, but then like 5 years down the road they're like, oh shit, I've actually evolved on something, what do I do now? And then they have to like fight their fucking audience tooth and nail, just to be able to express themselves in a newer, different way.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like, unironically, like the way that a lot of discussions are going, and like from an exclusively egoistic perception of a public figure, you unironically want to have a relationship with your following where they're legit like, oh, what's my opinion on this? I don't know. X figure hasn't made a video on it yet. Like, unironically, that's the type of thing, that people are trying to like get at, and that's what's most personally profitable for an
Oh my
individual, right?
god.
Because you do all
Yeah.
my thinking. I'll be here. I'll promote you, and I'll give you a bit of money here and there. And that's the I guess suppose like egoistic
Ah.
relationship of like a public figure, so to say. Um,
Yeah, isn't that funny? Because like I see that meme like posted ironically, but then I also think that there are like chunks of people who are just like, yeah, fuck it, like
yeah,
like
exactly.
I'll outsource my fucking critical thinking ability because it's fucking more convenient. And then there's like that like tribal shit too, where literally like, so I had some out of context clips that were posted in Destiny's like subreddit or whatever,
Mhm.
and I just had a bunch of fucking DGGers in the comments fucking mauling, like being like, oh, well, this is stupid and you're a bad person and like this shit, the other shit or whatever.
Mhm.
And I literally went on to fucking Destiny's stream and talked to him about it. And I was like, okay, let's see if we can agree on this shit. And like by the end of the conversation, he agreed with all my positions. So I was like, fuck you, DGG. Like if you actually had heard the in context shit, then like you wouldn't have been fucking mauling in my goddamn comments, you
Mhm.
fucking assholes.
Yeah,
And,
absolutely
and
true.
and that's where these things get like really toxic.
Mhm. And I would say that like Destiny tries to do this better than most when it comes to the things that we talk about. And even in that community, like there are some specific issues. So like same thing happened. Like I had a conversation with Destiny, or like a debate, I don't know what it was, discussion, I guess, with him a while back, and we were having a discussion. It was a chill discussion. It was like well mannered, and we moved like back and forth on a couple of points. And just generally, like, it was a good discussion, and Destiny said he appreciated it or whatever. And he's like spoken somewhat fondly of me afterwards, so I assume it went well. But holy fuck, if you look in the chat during that debate, like you will see some crazy ass shit. Like we're
Yeah.
here having like a really super calm discussion, and people like I can't believe somebody with the cultural heritage of a Swede believes he has anything relevant to say to American politics. This fucker should get off American politics internet right now and go back to fucking building IKEA furniture, whatever the fuck. I'm like, holy shit, dude.
Go
Chill
back to
out.
eating meatballs, you asshole.
Exactly, like, oh my god, it's actually it's terrifying. But yeah, but then that's why I think, like, specifically in regards to what you're talking about before, where you just expect a public figure to say, like, what you're feeling and to reflect that sentiment. And that's why this is a thing that Destiny's been harping about, like, for a while now, why it's super important to be able to have sort of like consistent moral framework, so you can analyze things on your own and see whether you like it or feel good about it or not. Because typically, like, when people are doing that, they're just like, I intuitively feel this about this thing. Now you come up and try to justify this for me. There is not a single human being in existence that can intuitively feel correctly about everything. And if there was, holy shit. I mean, at that point, fuck it. Maybe monarchy doesn't sound that bad. But the good thing is that we will never ever get to that point. And because of that, you like encourage the audience to do that, like thinking for themselves, which is a very positive thing. For it not to be contradictory and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, have you watched the Vosh's Unironically Evil video yet?
I did watch it.
Yeah, so I'll just share my feelings so you don't feel like you have to go out on a limb.
Mm-hmm.
My feelings is that, like, Vosh is a very charismatic and rhetorically gifted person, but he kind of, in that video and also in other segments or whatever, he does say, like, I'm going to say what I need to say in order to advance my agenda, and if it's true, then it's true, and if it's not true, then it's not true, and ultimately I think these things are kind of like subjective anyway, so I'm doing my best within, like, my rhetoric to forward the agenda that I believe in.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the reason why, like on one hand, I appreciate him being honest with that, because I think that's ultimately what a lot of people do, is they have a political agenda, they want to forward it, and they kind of post hoc rationalize what they're trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
But then I think that also sets up like an emperor has no clothes kind of situation, where if you see somebody who's like taking an inconsistent or indefensible position, then you're like, oh fuck, like, does he actually believe this shit, or is he literally just adopting like a rhetorical position because he knows that it's going to further his interest? And then that kind of like gets shitty, because like my perspective is like things should be rooted more in truth more than how I feel, and it should also be rooted in truth more than my agenda. And when I look at like the history of like monarchy or dictatorship, oftentimes the dynamic that's adopted is kind of like, I hate to say it, but like the Voshian position, which is like, as long as it forwards my agenda, I don't give a fuck whether or not it's true. And that's really, especially in like a liberal democracy, that's really scary to me.
Yeah, I think that video made some good points. I do think that I think this is like inevitable, so this isn't necessarily like a fault of the person that made the video, but there are certain instances in which I believe there was like he made a few like leaps here and there, and there was a bit of like uncharitability here and there. But to be fair, that is expected if you're making an hour-and-a-half video, like primarily critiquing somebody. It's not surprising that you develop some forms of like subconscious biases while working on this project, right? But I do feel like there was a lot of like valuable criticism there that I really hope that like, I don't know if Vosh has made a response to it yet or said anything about it, but that he sift through and try to extract value from, because he is, like, unironically, if I had to say, he's probably the best just like purely rhetorician like on the online politics scene, like easily. So if he like is able to improve on the things that he might be doing less well at the moment, like, holy shit, there is so much potential there. But unfortunately, like with most like this public figures in general, the longer one has been doing the thing that they're doing, the less likely they are to make like radical changes or like improvements or such, which is it's pessimistic, but it seems to be true overall. Now, it's not true for all cases, so I'm not saying, oh well, it's fucked, I guess, but yeah, I mean, that's just like the reality of the matter for a lot of situations. So yeah, I think
it's fucked, I guess.
yeah, I just leave it there. Fuck it. Do you know if he has responded or said anything about that video yet, or?
No, I haven't seen anything, but it's gained enough traction that like
he knows about it. There's no way he doesn't know about it.
Yeah, and then I guess this is where I think you pointed out something that I have enough internal knowledge to kind of like help color. I wouldn't take the criticisms of levied in that video uncritically. And the reason why I say that is because that same creator basically did a video for Hey It's Vadim, like Creationist Cat or whatever. And Hey It's Vadim, like I'm not gonna like reveal too much or whatever, but we've had like private discussions basically about, and it's specifically about the fallout from the Hippy Dippy Championship. And Hey It's Vadim and I have had like personal conversations about like, you know, what his motivations were and what he was trying to achieve and what he was perceiving at the time and when he perceived it, and his frustrations and like all that kind of stuff. And the video that was made was like very, very like hypercritical and just basically assigning every one of his motivations to like a personality flaw or subconscious bias or shitty motivation or manipulation or something like that. And that's where, you know, talking to Vadim, like the you know, we all have blind spots, right? But talking to him, I could see that it was actually like a lot more nuanced and he really did care. And he had misgivings about what was going on and like all that kind of shit. And that's where, so for me, while I think it's okay to like use information to criticize people, I think it's also I also think it's important to realize that like what you're seeing online is maybe 20%, 30% of like a person's actual feelings and expressions of what they're capable of articulating in a recorded format. Whereas like if they had unlimited time to express all of their emotions, then you would get like a much more nuanced picture. And that's kind of where like I think while some of those criticisms are legitimate, everybody should take it with a grain of salt and not be like, oh yeah, Vosh is actually an evil person, let's burn him at the fucking stake now, you know, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, like nobody's ever going to make a perfect critique of any human being ever, because it's once again we go back to the, if people were able to do that, hey, maybe monarchy wasn't that bad, you know. But like it gets back to this fundamentally again, which we know that that's never gonna happen. So but yeah, but even though there will be flaws, I just there is still definitely value to be like attained from that specific piece of criticism, and I hope that you know, you're able to sift through that effectively and pick out what you find value in and look at it somewhat charitably.
And well, and I want to address something between us too. So I know that you and Lauren probably are not going to be friends in the future.
Like, I mean, you should call me mentally ill, so probably not.
Probably
it's going to be
right?
a no. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess my I guess my thing is because, you know, it actually unironically sucks when I have people that I respect or I like or I'm trying to work with or whatever, and they fucking like, you know, hate each other's guts or think each other are like evil or whatever. It actually sucks to be in the middle. But what I would say is my stated goal and my continued goal is to serve as a bridge between the right and the left, and also to kind of like break down these communicative barriers. Also, while trying to get the right wing to come my way, because I do think that there's things on the right that are worth defending, and I think I articulate those things all the time. And I do think there's things that are worth conceding, because we're not defending these things because they're good for society. We're defending these things because these are the right-wing positions. So we don't have like a lot of like data or support or you know, logical philosophical coherency, you know, supporting these things. Although you know, obviously if you factor in religion, these questions get a lot more hard. So I think that like part of the reason why I want to continue to reach out or whatever is because obviously like I'm basically taking on a toxic asset. That toxic asset is the association with Lauren Southern, the neo-Nazi queen. That's the toxic asset. But the job or the mission has not changed, which is basically try to get the right wing away from you know, basically cults of personality, trying to get the right wing away from toxic behaviors that are like cyclical or self-justifying, and then also try to be a communicative bridge, because why, like even if we don't agree on descriptions, right? So what sucked about that debate was there was probably a 20-second clip where Lauren, you, me, and Fanatic all agree that the war on drugs needs to be changed, and
it's a 20-second clip. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's a bad thing about it. That's the 20-second clip. Yeah.
Yeah, we all agree that the war on drugs needs to be changed. We all agree that it's partially the role of the government to support healthy and happy families. We all agree that there's like historical discrimination that has led to issues with intergenerational wealth. But if you were to watch
It was
that,
very hard for Lauren to concede that. Maybe she does, but holy fuck, it felt like I was pulling teeth with that statement at the very end there. But who knows? Maybe you know more about it.
But I think the reason why it was pulling teeth though is because it's viewed as making this concession weakens my side and strengthens the opposite, rather than this is descriptive reality that we're trying to come to consensus on and understand each other's perspectives, and then how do we move forward from here? Because I guarantee you there's plenty of shit that we could fight about as far as like prescriptive differences, or whether or not each person in the conversation is a fucking piece of shit. We can get into those weeds all the fucking time, right? That's very easy to do, and I would say that's like 80% of fucking Twitch politics is whether or not your political opponent is a piece of shit, and whether or not there's like a descriptive difference or a prescriptive difference that's big enough for you to scream at each other about. But I would say you don't have to like somebody in order to forward politics. So, for instance, especially in like an electoral sense, if there was a whole bunch of social conservatives who thought that like Black Lives Matter and Antifa was a terrorist organization, but then it comes down the pipe from an electoral process where they're like, hey, we want to increase the minimum wage and we want to increase like child tax benefits that help support working families or whatever. It doesn't matter if they're a fucking asshole or if their fucking politics are bullshit. If they vote yes, that's a part of building bipartisan consensus to get good policy done. And that's where I kind of want to, it's hard, but I want to move from like the individual moral indictments of who is a good person and a bad person. And I also want to move away for like, because we viscerally disagree on this political description or prescription doesn't mean that we can't forward stuff that we do agree on. And that's what I'm trying to get to.
Yeah, so I don't disagree with what you said. I'm gonna add like a little bit more like nuance there. Obviously, I think it's probably a bit silly to just be like, oh, fuck this person. Everything they ever have to say is terrible. If they tell me to drink water, I'm drinking milk for the rest of my life. You know, like that type of thing is a bit silly. I do think to some extent though, there is benefit, and people like typically ask this when it comes to like, oh, what if this good idea came from this bad person? Like there is some value in that. I'm sure you don't like disagree with this. I'm just stating it just to, you know, sure everybody gets the idea. But I think there still is value in being able to like analyze like a person and create sort of like a character profile of who they are and what they believe. And the reason why there's value to that is, well, number one, obviously it can be taken too far, like the example I just provided. But the reason why there's value in that is that it can help you provide like, okay, so what perspective may this person be coming from? How could they be thinking about this? Are there any potential biases among this person that could have like clouded or highly motivated their reasoning or their thought process on this? And maybe from there I can see some forms of like inconsistencies or things that need to be worked on, or things that are wrong or incorrect or whatever. So yeah, I'm just gonna add that of course, like, don't just be like, well, this person's gone forever, fuck everything they ever have to say. I mean, that's like, in most cases that's a bit silly, but also don't be like, I'm going to like completely delete the memory of all these people every time I go and speak to somebody. They're like an anonymous person I've never met before. But just like keeping like a healthy sort of like character profile of other people can help you like think about their ideas in a more meaningful way.
And if I can point this out, because I think this was like actually one of the major sins of the Tale of Twin Rabbits debate, which like I think we can all agree was an optic win for the right, an optic win for Lauren Southern, you know, like all that kind of stuff. Like the primary problem. So like I completely agree that like in order to know, you should know who you're dealing with. It's particularly or you should have like a sussed out profile of that person. That way you can understand their motivated reasoning, or at least like repeat back to them their motivated reasoning in a way that they're not going to object to. And so that's all well and good, and it's particularly important in the debate space or the rhetorical space to be able to do that. What I would say though is that the trap that you mentioned, which is like basically having like a negative profile where people can't ever say the correct thing ever because they're just like morally, individualistically a piece of shit, is actually what happened in the Tale of Twin Rabbits debate. So what happened was Serfs and Twin came in assuming that Lauren Southern is the evil neo-Nazi queen and that she's a piece of shit and she can't fucking say anything right. Well, what happened as a result was when I, as a teammate, or she, made descriptive statements that were like verifiable,
They
they
fought you
couldn't
on that
even.
for literally no reason. Yeah.
Right, right, because they were so ready to disagree that they
Mhm.
weren't even listening to what was being said. And then what ends up happening is you end up fighting over things that are like descriptively verifiable
Mhm.
rather than agreeing on something that's true
Mhm.
and then moving to the actual contention. And I think that's like a bit of like rhetorical advice for people who are aspiring to get into the debate sphere is just because your opponent makes a point that's true
Mhm.
doesn't mean that you have to fight them on it because they're your opponent.
Yeah,
You know?
exactly. And that's something that's just generally like more people need to understand. And I was gonna mention something as well in like previously when you talked about like political opponents and political ideology and stuff like that. Um,
Mm.
it feels like this is like the curve for like political ideologies kind of looks a
Mm.
bit similar to like the Dunning-Kruger term in the sense that hey, like when you get into politics, you're just like, oh, my ideas are so unique and special and never thought of before. I don't belong in any political categorization. I feel uncomfortable with the labels. And then you do a little bit more reading. You're like, okay, never mind. I kind of fit into these like ideological like bends and categorizations a little bit. And then you like do like a fair bit of reading and are integrating the communities and do like action and participation and stuff like that. And then you once again get back to like holy fuck, these categorizations miss a lot of nuance and promote a lot of like harmful behaviors. So it's kind of like
Mm.
like that effect where like either when somebody says that they don't fully like politically identify with something, they're a dumb fuck who thinks they're super unique when they're really not, or they're somebody who's like actually spent a lot of time and tends to be pretty like educated on the topic, so to say. But yeah.
Yeah, and that's the yeah. So that's kind of. I hope that I fall into the second category, but obviously, we all run the risk of thinking we're smarter than we are.
Mhm.
So the what I would say is what's actually been really interesting for me on my political journey or whatever, especially within the Twitch space,
Mhm.
is thinking that I have unique arguments, and then somebody's like, "Hey, actually, that's not unique," and here's this like personality 150 or 200 years
Exactly.
ago, or
Yeah.
even 50 years ago, and they're like, they actually articulated your exact worldview, and I'm like, oh
Mhm.
shit. Well, I guess it really is nothing new under the sun.
Mhm.
But so far, it's kind of been cool for me because the people that have been the people that have been forwarded to me as like the examples of what I believe in
Mhm.
actually have been like extremely effective, very unique characters. So, for instance, Theodore Roosevelt in the United States, he was only a one-term president, but his politics were like so esoteric, but also simultaneously effective
Mhm.
that he's fucking famous for being like one of the most weird one-off effective politicians of all time.
Mhm.
Same thing with Pierre Trudeau, who was one of like the founding founding people in Canada for civic nationalism, and that's Justin Trudeau's dad.
Mhm. Oh.
He was like a weird one-off, hyper-effective civic nationalist centrist politician who, when other politicians were telling him he was fucking insane, he said, I don't give a shit. Fuck you. I'm implementing my agenda as aggressively as possible.
Mhm.
And that's where part of my problem is I feel like in the political space is there's a lot of people who have they have like the factional instinct to reinforce their side or their faction, like whether or not you're talking about like Marxist Leninists, ANCOMs, Libsocs, whatever,
Mhm.
or the alt right or ethnonats or whatever. They all have the instincts to become leader of the tribe and then reinforce their positions. But there's not a lot of people who will climb to those positions of power within the tribe and then say, hey, this is what we have right and this is what we have to offer society, but I've actually climbed the rungs. I can kind of see society from like a broader perspective, and
Mhm.
this is where I think we're wrong and we need to modify our perspectives. And we don't see a lot of leadership like that, and that's frustrating because I think we're facing so many crises right now, whether you're talking about like global warming, mass immigration, war on terror, anything like that.
Mhm.
We need somebody who actually like has the balls and the brains to forward a different agenda than what we have right now. And I think we're all expecting the baby boomers to save us,
Mhm.
and they're not going to. We have to grow the fuck up.
Yeah, and I mean, like when it comes to this specifically, it's like when it comes to like leaderships, and it's like it's sort of like a consequence of political polarization, which is generally and like misinformation and stuff like that, which is just causing people to get more and more and more and more dug into their specific beliefs and to have pretty much like be living in different and alternate realities from each other, which just makes those kinds of like leaderships like all the more rare and hard to come by, and yeah, and yeah, still super desirable, but just like the likelihood of that occurring just it gets reduced because there's so many other like extraneous factors that is just that like killing, you know, people's abilities to do politics effectively. And there's like a whole range of causes for that, but yeah, like media
Well,
and the internet and alternative media especially is like a large driver behind that. Misinformation as
well,
well.
and if I can forward my agenda publicly or whatever,
Mhm.
part of the reason why I even appreciate your ability to respond to my Discord message and take my call
Uh-huh.
is because I think it's very easy to just be like, oh, that's the neo-Nazi rebrander. That's the
Yeah.
fucking Nazi apologist.
Hmm.
But basically, if we're talking about polarization, where there was maybe something slightly further right than Lauren Southern, which was basically like the alt-right or the ethno-nats, like Richard Spencer, and maybe Nick Fuentes. Like I think those are the only two people that would have been more extreme than Lauren's politics.
Hmm.
If we look at those people and we say, okay, well, you know, that's the pole, the on the right, that's kind of like the center of gravity, and that's where people are getting pulled.
Hmm.
And then if we look at the left, I know that you guys don't have as much electoral representation,
Hmm.
but if we say that like Vosh, the Machiavellian anarcho-communist, and I don't even know if there's like a good tanky representation, but basically, if we say that
There's
there's like
well, yeah, there is thank you representation. I guess it would be infrared, but think think what you will of him, I guess. But,
yeah. So the point is that if we don't want people to be attracted to these centers of gravity, then we have to like improve communication between the poles.
mm,
And that's what sucks is I'm making nobody happy. Like at all times, I'm just upsetting everyone. Because like the centrists are like, oh, I wish you didn't associate with all these extreme personalities because we shouldn't even be listening to them. And then the extreme from one side will be like, oh, you're a piece of shit for associating with this extremist. And then the other people will be like, oh, you're a piece of shit because you're not extreme enough.
mhm.
And that's like the frustration of trying to drag everybody back to the center is nobody fucking likes you. Like nobody likes you at all.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's a struggle. But like I asked you this question a while. Maybe you like developed or want to say something about it. But like, how do you feel like positively, or how do you feel about basically having become Lauren's like de facto debate partner, so to say?
yeah, I mean, I'm okay with it because basically, I think what I've told her this, and I'll tell y'all this too. I will never assume a position that I actually don't hold publicly,
Mhm.
and so I think part of the reason why that last debate was so contentious between you, Rose, and Fanatic is because the only part that Lauren and I agreed on
Mhm.
was the descriptive part or
Mhm.
not the descriptive part, the prescriptive part,
Mhm.
where we basically thought that there were solutions that the left and right could get behind, and that these things we could work on together. Well, that wasn't even the conversation. The conversation was y'all fighting about descriptive shit for like 90 fucking minutes. At which point, like I think I was literally silent like 80% of the time.
Mhm.
So that's the thing is like I don't have a problem with it because frankly, this is where you could accuse me or whatever of being friends with a nefarious person, but you can't accuse me of irresponsible platforming. I already have a one-on-one debate with Lauren. I think I did really well in it. With the Tale of Twin Rabbits debate, I think that was a problem, frankly, from your side that they didn't show up prepared. And then when it
Wait,
came
hold on.
to
Don't ever associate me with the Serfs and the Rabbit guy. Okay, get that shit the fuck out of here. All right, don't give me that. Don't give me
listen,
that.
listen, if I have to take a rap for the bad parts of the right, you got to take a rap for the bad parts of the left. All
Okay,
right,
it
that's how
hurts,
this
man. It
goes.
hurts.
Yeah, you guys are fucking. You're best friends. You're boys. You go to dinner. You have fun. You do 12-hour Discord calls. So the point being,
Yeah, me and the
um,
Serfs were like this. You know, we're
yeah,
super close, super
but
close.
but the reason why I actually kind of liked the fanatic debate and the debate between you and Lauren is because it had nothing to do with me being there. I think it might as well have been a non-issue. I was like a half moderator and got 20 seconds of productive dialogue out of the entire thing.
Mhm.
The reason why I think it was good is because Lauren bumped into arguments and personalities that she hasn't had to deal with for a really long time.
Mhm.
Back in like 2016, back when she was debating like Destiny and like all that kind of shit, she was dealing with a heavy hitter who knew what he was talking about, who was well researched and rhetorically gifted. The truth is that the Twitch scene has completely changed. There's fucking killers out here, dude. There's killers who like, I don't know how many of your followers or subs or whatever, but followers or subs is not an indication of talent. There's a whole bunch of talented people who don't have as big a followings, and then there's a whole bunch of untalented people who have completely unjustified followings. So you can't be caught sleeping, or else you're going to look like a fucking asshole. So that's why I like that. I like that debate, even if Lauren felt like kind of caught flat-footed or whatever. Is the fact that, like, well, next time she has to address those arguments, or else it looks like she's not learning. And that's actually why I value the debate space.
I wish we would have been able to have that subsequent debate on Swedish immigration. That would have been fun as fuck. But I guess she doesn't care about Swedish immigration.
Why don't you broaden it to immigration in general? Like the concept of immigration and the sovereignty and autonomy of nation states to decide who and when people get into their countries, and what are like the moral duties incumbent upon societies. Because if you took it broader than just like the specific historical example, I think there's like a lot of philosophical implications and governmental implications from that thing. So like y'all have, I mean, I'm pretty sure y'all have like nuked your relationship from fucking orbit.
Yeah, I was about to say, like, I don't know how much of a chance, even if I broadened it to the fucking moon and we could talk about whatever the fuck we wanted. I don't think there's much risk of that happening.
But at the same time, this is my centrist thing, where it's like, if you come at it a little bit more charitably, this is like a Jordan Peterson thing. You don't play the game to win the one game. You play the game to win as many games as possible. And that's where I would say, what makes me sad about y'all nuking your relationship from fucking orbit, is while you can have like serious contentions, is there's not the opportunity for that bigger and broader debate, which could have been productive and could have been interesting. But because, Lauren's a natural born shit poster, and you are adept at it, we lost that opportunity, unfortunately. So.
Yeah, I mean,
it's not impossible, but you need to give it like 6 months, probably.
At the very least, and probably logging into redact.dev and getting rid of that entire interaction is probably the necessary step forward at this point. But I mean, at this point, I can say like, hey, okay, if I and I said this before as well privately, but if I had to pick like one more like center right-leaning person to get like a larger role, I suppose, in talking about online politics and just politics in general, it would have to be by like a long shot, at least from the people I'm aware of right now. So we can you can take that.
Yeah, and I don't have to take too much more of your time. I actually need to go get some lunch. But basically what I would say is the agenda has not changed. So I know I'm going to receive criticism for my participation and for the right spaces. I know that basically what's going to happen is that the lefties that this guy's reasonable until he's not. I know they're going to be frustrated because I'm going to be more like charitable or kind to right-wingers than they want me to be. But again, like the agenda has not changed at all, and it's a public agenda that I share with everyone, which is basically like, I want to shift the center of gravity to me, where people consider my arguments stronger than they would have in the past. And also the goal is to get the polls to communicate, because even though this is like a one-off debate that you and Lauren had, she contended with arguments that she probably hasn't contended with in the past, and you got to contend with like a major right-wing figure who has a big following. So if she comes at you next time, let's say like 6 months from now, she actually like fucking destroys you in a philosophy of immigration debate, I still don't view that as a bad thing. Like I view that as the polls are communicating with each other better because of this facilitation.
We can you can make the arguments about the likelihood of that occurring, but I get your point.
So don't cancel me yet. That's what I'm saying.
Not yet. That's an important qualifier. If you didn't add it, I was gonna add it. So I think we're all on the same page now. All right. Well, it was a nice chat, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Yeah. All right, buddy. I'll catch you. Take it easy.
All right. Bye. Nice. I like Connor. Cool person.